Okay, so we're going to make a start. Welcome everyone to the next installment of the Energy Institute's technical webinar series. My name is Ibrahim Khan. I'm a technical officer here at the Energy Institute, and today we're exploring Tripod Lite. It's the newest product developed by the Tripod Foundation. So before we get into it, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping rules and briefly introduce the role of the Energy Institute. The webinar will be recorded and made available after the fact. You as attendees will be muted, but we encourage you to interact with us in the Q&A and chat functions. Many of you are already introducing yourself, and it's great to see so many people coming from all over. If you're already a member of the Energy Institute, don't forget that these sessions count towards your CPD. You can find the template on the EI website. And if you're not an EI member, you might want to consider becoming one. If you're part of another membership organization, you might still be able to use this webinar towards a CPD scheme. So we are the Energy Institute. We are a chartered professional membership body for the global energy industry. Our aim is to create a better and safer energy future for both our members and wider society. And we want to achieve this above all by accelerating a just transition to net zero. Why join? Well, that really depends on you. You might want to already work within the energy sector and become more connected. You might want to become more informed about energy, or you may be pursuing professional qualifications that are relevant to a career in the energy sector. If you're interested in membership, we have a few different types, so please visit our website page or get in touch with our membership team at membership@energyinst.org. Our members can also access our publications, where we have guidance documents covering the entire energy system, including the topics you see listed here on the screen, from aviation to offshore wind, and much more besides. Some of our resources are freely available, so please do check our publishing website to find out more. So on to the main event. On your screen are our speakers for today. I'm joined by my colleague from the Energy Institute, Stuart King, and 4 members of the Tripod Foundation board who will be introducing themselves in due course. Please do bear with us for any slide changeovers, barring any technical issues. I'll hand you over to my colleague. Good afternoon, Stuart.
Hi, everybody. So let me just give me a few seconds just to get my slides up. So hopefully those are showing, Ibrahim?
Yeah, we can see you.
Excellent. Okay, so welcome everybody. My name is Stuart King. I'm Good Practice Manager for Human Factors and Power Systems at the Energy Institute. I've worked at the Energy Institute for about 14 years, and for the last 10 or so years, I've also worked closely with the Tripod Foundation. So I'll be taking you through this first slide pack, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Tony Goward-Jones. So Tripod Lite. So first, let me just introduce you to the Stichting Tripod Foundation. So Stichting is Dutch for foundation, so it's the Foundation Tripod Foundation. The Tripod Foundation is a charity based in the Netherlands. It was set up by Shell in 1998. And as I said, the Energy Institute has worked closely with the Tripod Foundation since 2012. The foundation itself is managed by the Tripod board, and the current chair of the foundation is Emanuela Simica, who is also General Manager for Business Transformation at Shell. And Emanuel's put forward a vision for what the foundation is to achieve, essentially. Everybody is somebody's most important person in the world. It's the responsibility of organizations, leaders, supervisors, and colleagues to make sure that person gets home safely. And the foundation exists to try to make this vision come true, essentially. So what does the foundation do then? So ultimately, the foundation exists to help organizations on their journey to becoming better and safer companies. And the foundation believes that the way to do that is fundamentally by using scientifically proven methods that pushes organizations forward. The foundation is also here to provide thought leadership, and ultimately it's here to develop, promote, and ensure the high quality delivery of these proven methods that are used to learn from events and sustainably embed learning into organizations. The the At the heart of the Tripod Foundation are what we call the tripod technologies, and you know, a key purpose of the foundation is to promote the good use of good practice, you know, the the good use of tripod technologies. And the foundation has spent well, really since its existence in 1998, developing these tripod technologies. We're talking about tripod Lite today, but tripod beta was the first and original methodology developed by the foundation, and also recently we've developed something called investigation insights, which is for engaging leaders. So across the suite, the Tripod Foundation has tools to investigate near misses and incidents, engage leaders, and embed learning. However, tripod technologies really stemmed from a research program stemming all the way back to the early 1980s. And that research program continued throughout the 1980s and 1990s and actually still continues today under the Energy Institute, where research is being conducted at various different universities around the UK and formerly in Europe as well. And so tripod technologies have actually made their way into lots of other tools that are delivered either by other organizations or sometimes by the Energy Institute as well. So Bowtie and Tripod Beta were actually developed by essentially the same team in Shell in the early 1990s, and there's a clear link between Bowtie and Tripod. And of course, Bowtie is a very widely used and known tool. The Hearts and Minds a Safety Culture Toolkit, which is again was developed by Shell, was published by the Energy Institute. Again, essentially sprung out of the same research program that led to Tripod. And the life-saving rules, which were developed as well within Shell and with further work developed by IOGP, were fundamentally based on a series of Tripod Beta accident investigations, which essentially uncovered the I guess the final barrier within that led to fatal incidents, and these directly led to the formation of the life-saving rules. So tripod as a concept is actually quite far-reaching, and it's often not known about. So what actually is tripod then? So tripod is ultimately a way of understanding why incidents and near misses and other unwanted events happen. It's closely tied to the Swiss cheese model, and it really is all about barriers and the placement of barriers in between hazards and events, and understanding why those barriers failed. It's all about understanding the role of people in those barrier failures and understanding the human factors behind those, so performance influencing factors and other factors that influence the behavior of people and why they do what they do. And ultimately, tripod is about understanding organizational factors. So what were the systemic issues to do with policies, leadership, and all other sorts of issues that essentially set incidents in motion, that create these performance influence factors and other conditions that essentially set people up for failure or success. So that's essentially what the tripod model is all about. But key to tripod is understanding what were the aspects within an incident that we can actually control in order to prevent future incidents. We can't control every aspect. We can't control, for example, people directly and what people do, but we can control the environment that people work within. So as an example. So within the Tripod Foundation, we saw a problem. And this problem, the first part of this problem is that essentially weak signals are being missed. So Tony will talk about this a little bit later, but typically organizations will have hundreds or even thousands of near misses or low-level incidents reported each year, depending on the size of the organization, of course. Typically, there isn't enough time to investigate all of these near misses and low-level incidents in detail. They're generally recorded, usually detailing what happened, but not necessarily why the incident happened. So really, the most severe incidents are investigated, but not necessarily all of the low-level near misses. So if they're not investigated, why even bother reporting all these near misses? Well, ultimately, it tells us whether our reporting system is working. So when something serious happens, we know about it. But because they're not typically investigated in detail, ultimately this means that we mostly learn from the rare serious events, but not these common everyday events. So we asked the question, imagine if we could capture the weak signals from all of these low-level events and try to learn before serious incidents happen. What might that look like? How could we do that? Well, firstly, why does the problem exist in the first place? The first part of that is time. So Tony will go into this in more detail, but in-depth investigations take time, and that time is not necessarily available. Particularly, typically a frontline supervisor may have a few hours at most to complete a low-level incident report. They certainly don't have days or weeks to complete an in-depth investigation. The other reason why this problem exists is, we believe, down to the tools that are available for investigating incidents. Often the tools that are for investigating more complex incidents are quite have a bit of a learning curve to them, and the tools that are perhaps simpler, things like 5 whys, are very unstructured and often highly dependent on having skilled investigators who know what to look for, know what to look for when it comes to human factors, for example. And the last is around expertise, and this is linked to the tool question as well. So a good investigation requires a skilled investigator or a very structured tool, and it takes time for to train someone up to the level required to carry out an in-depth investigation, particularly one that's unstructured. So what were our aims as the foundation? So we wanted to develop a tool to solve this problem. We were quite keen to make sure that the tool was free to use, so that it could be used by anyone and everyone. We want to make sure it's quick and simple to use as well. So we've got this idea of just a few hours in order to investigate an incident. We want to make sure that the tool required minimal training to be able to use. The tool needs to be designed for those who need to carry out these low-level investigations. So that's supervisors often, managers as well, but of course trained investigators should also be able to use the tool as well. So the tool would really have a very broad audience. We want to make sure the tool was consistent, so it was systematic and investigations could be consistently investigated in order to make sure that we could pull the results of multiple investigations together. And again, Tony will talk about that more in detail. Primarily, we've aimed Tripod Lite to be suitable for less complex incidents. So we're primarily using it for these sort of low levels of incidents, near misses. And one of the board members set a challenge, and and that was, can the tool be used by a supervisor who has 2 hours to conduct a simple investigation of a near miss or low level incident? And that includes, interviewing a few people, completing the incident reports, the whole thing. So that was our challenge. So what did we do? So we drafted the Tripod Lite tool in late 2021. We conducted phase 1 testing of that first draft with 2 organisations, so a water company in the UK and a large international consultancy. So they took the tool, played with it, tested it out on some low-level investigations, and then we got the feedback from that. And from that phase 1 testing, we found that the proof of concept had promise, but we did need to make quite a few improvements to the tool. So the second draft was developed, and then phase 2 testing started around summer of 2022. Many users were invited to take part in that testing. We collected the user feedback in a few different ways. So there was a survey, a focus group, and of course we got written data just by, written feedback by email. And then the final improvements to the tool were made, and we published the tool in March 2023. The results of the testing, I've got a few slides of that a little bit later on about the results. But before we get to the results, well, what actually is Tripod Lite? So Tripod Lite is a lightweight investigation tool. It's free to download and use from the Energy Institute website. And ultimately, it's available in 2 formats. So there is a PDF format, which is in some ways the more complete version, which contains guidance, etc., etc. So start with the PDF version. But there is also an Excel version as well, which has a few additional features and is a little bit more for advanced users. I'm mostly going to talk about the PDF version. So what does the tool contain? So there are a few key features to it. So the first is that the PDF version and the Excel version are both intended to be complete incident reports. So we were very keen that potentially a company could take the PDF version of Tripod Lite and use that instead of whatever incident reporting form they're currently using. So within that PDF, we have a page where we can record, basic information about what happened. The typical information that you might expect in an incident report. So description of the incident, the time of the time it happened, who investigated it. The classification, if you're going to classify it by severity, consequences, etc., etc. And within the PDF itself, you just write the information straight into the PDF. So that the idea is the PDF acts as your report, and you just write everything straight into that PDF, save it, and that's your incident report. There's also space to capture images directly into the PDF itself. And then we have the incident analysis, and I'll talk about that more in a few slides. And lastly, we also have the recommendations. So within Tripod Lite, you record the recommendations for, as we see, the failed barriers and what we call, I guess, short-term and long-term recommendations directly into the Tripod Lite PDF. So it's designed to be a self-contained tool. Now, as I said, Tripod Lite has been designed for non-experts to use. So we don't expect you to be an expert. And within Tripod Lite itself, it contains essentially all of the guidance that you would need in order to use the tool. So it provides comprehensive but very simple to follow guidance. In many cases, it's step-by-step guidance on how to carry out a Tripod Lite analysis. We also include tools to help identify human factors, as well. And when it comes to the performance influencing factors, which we call job factors in the tool, we contain drop-down lists, which can help classify, but also help prompt the investigator to look for different types of job factors, have to do with the environment, procedures, design of equipment, etc., etc. And when it comes to organizational factors as well, we also include a drop-down list of organizational factors. And again, this is to help us categorize these for later analysis, but it also acts as a way to prompt the investigator to look for certain issues. So at the heart of Tripod Lite is the Tripod Lite analysis diagram. Okay, and this is what sets Tripod Lite apart from any other tool. And the Tripod Lite analysis diagram is split into 3 parts. The first part describes what happened. Okay, and this is a simple timeline of events, and that's split up into 5 boxes. And you complete these boxes in order. You don't have to do it strictly in order, but the order of the boxes is designed to coincide with when you are likely to find out the different types of information during the investigation. So we start off in the middle with an event, and we record the event essentially as it's been described to us. So, for example, Jim has tripped over a bucket. Okay, so this is a very, very simple example just to demonstrate how it's completed. So that's our event. We then ask, okay, who or what was injured? In this case, it's quite straightforward. It was Jim. We look at what harm occurred. And that could be the actual harm, or it could be the potential harm if we want to take it to, what's the worst case scenario. In this case, the actual harm was grazed hands. Moving to the left side of the diagram, we look at the context. And the context is essentially, it's almost a hint of what was going on before the incident happened. That's what it's about. So it could have been an earlier incident that escalated into Jim tripping over the bucket, or it could be a description of the task that was going on. In this example, I'm just going to put Jim was walking down the corridor. Interior decorators were working in the area. Okay, so we've got a sense of that there was some other work going on in the vicinity. Next, we look at the hazard. And the hazard is essentially the thing that caused the injury. In this case, there's a bucket on the floor. Okay, so very simple. So this is a really simple, example, but it just sort of demonstrates that you can quite quickly put together a description of, what happened for an incident, and this allows us then to focus in on the next stages. Before we get to the next stage, it's worth noting that these numbers in the actual PDF version of the tool, these numbers that appear in the Tripod Lite analysis diagram, when you click them, it takes you straight to the guidance that you need in order to complete this each box. So in this case, click on button 1 and you get the guidance needed to fill in the event box. You click on number 2, you get the guidance needed to fill in the who or what box, etc. Okay, so once we have our simple description of what happened, we then look at how it happened. And in Tripod, this essentially are the barriers, or the failed barriers if we're looking at an incident, or there could have been, some of them could be failed, but some of them could actually be effective barriers if we're looking at a potential incident, a near miss that didn't happen, that was caught, at the last minute, for example. So in Tripod Lite, the PDF version, we have space for 4 barriers. Now, 4 barriers should be plenty for most incidents. In the Excel version, though, there is space for 8 barriers. So that just gives you an idea that the Excel version is for, if you need a little bit more, slightly more complex incident, and you need more space, more barriers, etc. So the barriers. So I've just in our simple example, I've got 2 barriers that I've added, and it's worth saying that in Tripod Lite, the barriers on the left are the preventative barriers, and the barriers on the right are the mitigations. So it's very much like bow tie, where left side is prevention, right side is after the incidents happen, and the mitigations. You don't have to use tripod like that. You can, if you need 4 preventative barriers, you can use them for that. If you need 4 mitigation barriers, you can use them like that. It's just designed like that to prompt the investigators to think about not only the preventative barriers, but also the mitigation barriers as well. So in this example, I've got 2 barriers that I've placed in between the hazard and the event. And the first is store buckets in a safe place away from walkways. So this should have prevented Jim from tripping over the bucket. And the other barrier is close off the corridor or cordon off the working area. So again, both of these should have, if they were enacted, they probably would have prevented Jim from tripping over the buckets. Now it's worth noting, when you're investigating, where do these barriers come from? Did I just make them up? Well, for this example, yes, of course I made them up, but in a real investigation, these barriers will be documented in the procedures, or somebody will know about them. So, the workers who were involved in the incident, often, even if it's not a documented barrier, there will be common practices that they follow. So that's where these barriers ultimately come from. They're not just made up by the investigator. The third part of the tripod light diagram is why it happened. And this is what we call in tripod the causation path. Now, I've only illustrated the causation path just for the 2 barriers that I have, but obviously each barrier has a causation path in the real tool. And the causation path is split up into 4 boxes in tripod light. We have an immediate cause, and the immediate cause is essentially, well, think about it like this. If the barrier is work as imagined, that's how, the work should have been done, then the immediate cause is actually how the work was done. So you can think of it in those terms if you want, but generally speaking, the immediate cause is a human action of some sort. It's not a judgment on why that human action took place. It's just what happened instead of the barrier. So for barrier number 4, we can see, well, the bucket was left on the floor by one of the workers. Okay, quite simple. It's almost the opposite of the barrier itself. If the barrier was store the bucket away, the immediate cause is that the bucket was left on the floor. The second part of the the causation path is a box that says mistake or non-compliance. And the third is the job factor, and these 2 are very highly related. So tripod light allows us to categorize the type of human behavior into a column. James Reason's GEMS model. So was it a lapse? Was it a slip? Was it a mistake? Or was it a non-compliance? And the third box is around the job factor. Now, the job factor it's essentially a performance influencing factor, and it allows us to explain why the person was, why was the bucket left on the floor by one of the workers? What explains that behavior? And there are 2 parts to the job factor. There is a completely open-ended box where you can actually type in information that's unique to this incident. So I've written a worker got called away to attend to something else. Okay, and I've classified that using one of the pre-provided categories that are in tripod light. Number 14 is distractions and interruptions. Okay, so I found a way to, I've explained the behavior, I've categorized it. The 4th box in the causation path is what we call the organisational factor. And the organisational factor is essentially linked to the management system, the safety management system. It's what was the weakness in the organisation in how the organisation manages its operations that made that job factor more likely. So what could lead to distractions, interruptions? Okay, in this example, bear in mind this isn't a real example. I've chosen supervisory oversight because there was no one supervising the job. Okay, so it's I've using tripod light and these simple boxes, I've built up quite quickly. I've built up an explanation for this particular 1 barrier and why that may have failed. when we let's look at barrier number 3, the only thing I'm not going to go into detail on this barrier. I just really want to sort of highlight that we absolutely recognise that with tripod Lite, depending on who is doing the investigation, it's not always going to be possible to get down to these organisational factors. The often a investigator can only really investigate up to a few levels above essentially above their pay grade. So if the investigator is this person down here, so let's say close off the corridor or cordon off the working area, that's the barrier, and we think there was a decision made to keep the corridor in use. Okay. If the investigator is this person down at the bottom, they can probably ask their boss, why was that decision made? And the boss can probably ask their boss why that decision was made. So there's a certain level that they can investigate up into the organization. But unless they've got very high level support from, someone very senior in the company, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to take the investigation all the way to, the senior management or the CEO level. So if the decision was made at a higher level, then sometimes we have to say we don't know. Okay, so we recognise that a tripod Lite investigation may be able to go down to the down to the organisational factor level, and I think in many cases that's going to be possible. And Tony will talk a bit about that as well, I think. But equally, it's important that people say they don't know if they don't know. This is a real example. So it's not a real investigation, but it's a real incident. And it's a real tripod Lite analysis of a real incident. And it's an incident that was found on the Energy Institute's Toolbox website. And now the Energy Institute's Toolbox website contains several hundred incidents, and they're all incidents that have been made publicly available by real organizations. So they oftentimes represent pretty good high quality investigations, and usually there's lots of information there for learning how to prevent the incident, but even then I could only find one barrier, immediate cause, job factor, and organizational factor. So that information was there, but for a real this really just demonstrates that for many real investigations, I would expect that 4 barriers will be enough, and you should be able to easily investigate many different types of incidents using this tripod Lite methodology. So what was the feedback on tripod Lite? So as I said, we developed it last year, we released it early this year. What has the actual feedback been? Well, the feedback's been very, very positive. So I said that we had this 2-hour, it wasn't a limit, but it was something to strive for. We wanted to see, can tripod Lite be used in as little as 2 hours? 66% of people said that tripod Lite took them less than 2 hours or up to 2 hours to use. I think 4 hours was the next most common, and there are a few that took a little bit longer than that. So clearly that tells us that tripod Lite can be used quite quickly to investigate incidents. 75% of users said that it was easy or extremely easy to use. 83% of users said it was extremely effective. Everyone said that it would require less than 1 day of training, but they did generally suggest that there would be some training probably needed, and so we are actually producing a short online training course to help that. But we're very much of the opinion that tripod Lite can be self-trained, basically. It's not that hard to use, but this online training course will give people a good start. And quite a few of the users had experience with other methodologies such as 5 whys, fault trees, taproot, etc., etc. And importantly, compared to these other methodologies, they reviewed tripod Lite very favorably. So generally, they saw tripod Lite as being easier to use, quicker to use, often better at identifying barriers and causes, and generally requiring less training. So I think that was important as well, just how it compares to other methodologies. And I guess importantly, we asked, do you think your organisation should adopt Tripod Lite? And 78% of the respondents said yes. So again, very positive feedback. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Tony now. I guess I need to stop sharing my screen.
There you go. This is where we do a quick technology handover and see whether it actually works. So let me. Hopefully that's switched over. Can you all see the new screen? Excellent. Yep. Thank you, Stuart, for that. So thank you very much, Stuart, for that. So I'm Tony Gower-Jones. I'm going to kick off and talk about multi-instance analysis and how we can use Tripod Lite to amplify weak signals. Yeah, a simple incident with one or two barriers or one or two causes is a weak signal. When you have major incidents, everyone can go back and go, oh, there was a weak signal here, one there, one there, one there, and then find lots of weak signals. Yeah. But the real crunch is how can you, from a single weak signal, actually start to get amplification? Because one in itself is not conclusive proof. Yeah. After an incident, it seems obvious. So it's about strengthening that signal. It's an amplification process. And we need to strengthen the signal by not using one, but using multiple instances together. If you've got hundreds of near misses, you can add them up together and amplify that signal to say, where are the weaknesses in the way we manage HSE in our system, in our organization, and what do we need to do about them? And that's what the amplification works. A detailed incident, if we've hammered through, takes lots and lots of full-time equivalent employees, typically 10 days, anything up to hundreds, even many, many years. One person going out, doing a couple of analyses, a couple of interviews, that ties up someone else, going and reviewing it with another supervisor, you'll quickly get 10 days. And if you spend 10 days per incident, then your organization's got about 5,000 near misses, and maybe it's 2,500 organization. You're going to be spending 10% of your employees' time is going to be spent on investigating incidents. There's clearly no organization can actually do that. Yeah? So that's why we're working on this target of about 2 to 4 hours, so that you can get some information out of those hundreds or thousands of near misses. Okay. And it only becomes feasible when we can capture those weak signals. Now, Tripod Lite has common causation categories in the immediate cause, the job factors, and the underlying causes. Also, the one thing Tripod Lite does that no other methodology does is it gives you that linear relationship from barrier to immediate cause, and this immediate cause was created or influenced by this underlying factor. And it is that linear causation factor at barrier level that allows you to start doing a few smart things with it. So what we did is we took the energy incidents toolbox, we pulled 28 incidents out of toolbox, we looked at the investigations that were there, and we mapped each of those into Tripod Lite. We mapped using the public information, and it took less than 15 minutes to take an existing public information into the analysis, to fill a Tripod Lite. Now, it was limited information there, and occasional organizational factors weren't specified. There were some 40 odd barriers in those 28 incidents, and where the information wasn't available, we made some assumptions about organizational factors. So the data you're going to see has some assumptions in it, but it's for demonstration purposes only. You can then add, using the common taxonomy, aggregate that data and start producing information. So if you take those 40 odd barriers, you can then look at, well, what was the most common immediate cause? And this is at the second level of categorization of immediate causes. So you see slips and lapses, automatic processing. You see the different types of mistakes, and at the second level, what created them. And you see different non-compliances. It says that most of the barrier failures were due to mistakes in that area. You can do exactly the same by taking the underlying causation and saying, what's the most common underlying causation? And here we see training and competence and risk management systems. The way that you do risk management is the way that you actually create the conditions where people are making mistakes, are making errors. The smart thing you can then do is, because of the linear linkage on the barrier level straight through underlying immediate cause to underlying cause, you can say what underlying causes created what types of immediate causes, right? And then you can come up with slightly more information. And here I've taken the immediate causation at the first level, which is just mistake, non-compliance, and automatic slips and lapses, the first level of the GEMS model. And what you see here is, well, most of our mistakes, over half of the mistakes that people make that mean barriers fail, are because of training or risk management. Well, what you're doing is, if this was 28 incidents, 40 barriers, I'd just like you to imagine you've got 1,000 near misses there and maybe 1,200 barriers. Yeah. And you create this type of information, and then you now start an HSE meeting at a senior level in your organization that says, this is actually why we have barrier failures and control failures in our organization. And this is where we now need to put detailed effort in, given that we've only spent 2 to 8 hours on every single incident and we've brought the whole lot together. We need to understand why, for example, our training and compliance management is creating so many situations where people are making this type of mistake, or why our risk management system is doing that. And that then creates you a work program of how you improve your management systems, based actually with the data from near misses talking and informing your management decisions on where to go forward. And that's what we talk about when we're really talking about the amplification of near miss data into something that is useful. So if I can bring everything together, we set ourselves a task of producing something that was available free of charge to people, can be downloaded. We see you get a much better low-level incident reporting, not perfect by a long shot. Many of you will not be able to get into detailed underlying causation, but very often you'll be able to say, well, I'm not sure quite where it is, but it's definitely in our procedures, or it's definitely in our training, or it's definitely in this area, our supervision. So even if you only know the area where the underlying cause lies, that is valuable information, not to immediately do something about it, but to amplify it. Several companies have already expressed a wish to adopt it. We've had the positive feedback. It's not perfect. Yeah. This is version 1.0 going out there. This is something that really needs you people out there to use it, to give us some feedback, to tell us, hey, could we do that with it, or to try and improve it on that. It's downloadable. Yeah, the links are, I think they're on the next slide, actually. You got nothing to lose. And a number of organizations have already pulled it up. Sorry, there's the link. Didn't even know what the next slide was. On that, I'd like to bring the presentation side of this to a close and open up for Q&As. We have a panel with us, and I think, Stuart, you're going to moderate the panel. So if we can have our panelists sort of show themselves by opening up their cameras. And Charlotte, on there. And I'll hand back. I'll stop sharing the screen now. I need to stop sharing it, don't I? There you go. Get the technology right. There, that's better.
Yep. So I think Ibrahim is moderating the panel.
Ibrahim moderating?
Sure, yeah. So thanks to both Tony and Stuart for your slides. Before we move to the audience questions, I'm actually going to ask our board members, now that they've emerged from the shadows, to introduce themselves and firstly consider what tripod means to them. So you might mention how you came across tripod, or why you sit on the board, or your perspective on incident investigation. So any takers to introduce yourselves?
I'm happy to go first.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead, Andrew.
Andrea Parker, I work at Shell, and I'm just thrilled to be here and part of this event. It is amazing that we seem to be touching all corners of the world with this. So it's great to see everybody here. So happy to have questions. So I work for Shell, and I sit in the safety team, and really my role looks at looks after high risk activities in Shell. But I came to the board probably 8 or 9 years ago, and I want to just return a little bit to Emanuela's kind of thinking around everybody as someone's most important person in the world, because that really, really resonates with me. And I really firmly believe that you come to work and you want to go home in the same form that you came to work in. So and unfortunately we have incidents in our organization. I think everyone has incidents to various different levels or degrees. And the most important thing is to learn from those incidents. So we really, really want to learn. And the way that we learn is through investigation. So why tripod? For me, I really like the bow tie and barrier thinking. So it's an easy model for me to understand. And I think that can help us learn. Why tripod Lite? Because some organizations do have the big incidents, but many organizations don't have that. But there is still opportunity to learn, and that's why I think that this model, a light version, gives us the opportunity to learn, so that we can take away that understanding and really prevent incidents from happening. So yeah, that's why I'm here and part of the board.
Thanks, Andrea. Right, who's next?
Hi, I'm happy to go next. I'm Charlotte, and I'm from SSE. The latest person onto the board, so I joined about 18 months ago, and I was thrilled to be asked to be on the board. When I came into it, I hadn't had any exposure to tripod beta at the time, so I went on to the tripod beta training course. And one of the things that immediately stood out to me, even as a safety professional, was that it was quite complex. So for a safety professional that understood barriers and doing the investigations, I think it made a, but it was still relatively complex, and you had to get your head around certain things. It was an extensive training program, and I thought it was great for the more detailed incidents. But when I found out then that we were going to be working on a lighter version and saw the tripod Lite, I thought this is a fantastic opportunity, because we're making it accessible to non-safety professionals, to people that maybe haven't seen the barrier theory, haven't used bow tie analysis, and et cetera. And I think to be able to use it, and you get a lot of the benefits from it that you get from tripod beta, but in a tool that you can learn in a relatively short space of time, and then to be able to use the tools and to be able to, for them to be freely available, I think is going to really add value to companies' investigations for those lower level incidents. And being able to have the editable tools on Excel or PDF, I think that's a fantastic opportunity. And the work that Tony's done in showing how you can amplify the signals and investigate your root causes when you have a group of incidents, that just takes it to the next level. So I'm really excited, and I hope lots and lots of people take up the opportunity of having the tripod Lite and using it to investigate their incidents and help more people to go home safe. That's what we're all about.
Well said. Thanks, Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. Okay, I'll go next if you hear me. I'm Robin Bryden, also with Shell. I look after personal safety at Shell, and I've been a user of tripod technology for 20-something years, and part of the board for more than 10. Don't like to think how long, but it's a wonderful group of people, and that's why I'm part of the foundation. It's because we are all driven to make a difference, to save lives and prevent life-changing injuries. And the tripod technologies, as you've heard, they're based on solid research, on decades of science, with that field tested in a wide selection of organizations. So it's that sort of combination of solid science and practical application. That's why it's so valuable to me personally, and I'm such a believer in the power of the foundation. And professionally, from a Shell perspective, it's also a wonderful opportunity to learn from other companies. With other organizations on the board, and through our engagements through the Energy Institute and the access to the wider energy network, we continue to learn all the time in this space. And I think what I'm most excited about right now is the work that Tony's just showed you on Tripod Lite, because the information that we put as HSE professionals, that we put in front of leadership teams, in front of boards, that shapes the decisions that those boards make. And if we look at individual incidents, you end up with decisions based on individual incidents. With looking at them as a collective and the insights you get from seeing the different underlying causes, as you just saw in the data, the sorts of decision making that happens around what do we need to do to address those underlying causes, that leads you to more systemic interventions. And that's how you don't just prevent one incident, you prevent lots of incidents from happening. So that's why I'm passionate about this tool, as well as it just being much more user friendly than some of the other techniques we have for more in-depth incidents.
So if I come in, I'm probably the geriatric on the board at that stage. I have the dubious pleasure for having been there for the very first board meeting back in 1998, last century. So that's going to my 25th year. And that's how long the tripod's been out there in the public domain as well. And I've seen it maturity in health and safety management thinking over the last 40 years grow hugely. But all the time, there is this core underneath it around barrier-based people behavior. People are good people. It's the way we try and organize. Managers generally are good managers as well out there that try and do the right things, and yet we still see mistakes. And you can map that through the tripod thinking. And the way that I've seen organizations and individual leaders, when they get barrier-based thinking in, completely change and become so much better leaders because they understand that. That's what gives me a huge thrill. When I see an organization or a leadership start telling me about barrier-based thinking and how great it is, I'm going, that's a great buzz. And that's why I still, although I've retired from full-time work, I still sit on the board, because I still get that buzz from my colleagues on the board and their fantastic thinking and challenge about we can always do things better.
Okay, well, I don't really see. I'm not officially a board member, although I do provide secretariat support to the board. I guess I came across Tripod, although it wasn't called Tripod when I first came across it, in one of the Energy Institute's publications. So its original publication on human factors integration into accident investigations, which was published in 2008. And at the core of that was, I believe they called it the resident pathogen model, which essentially is the tripod causation path that we've talked about today, but with a strange name, to be fair. So but the fact that model was at the heart of our guidance at the Energy Institute on accident investigation, and it was only later that we made contact with the Tripod Foundation, and came across them, the good work that they were doing, and immediately saw the synergies with that work. And I guess what does Tripod mean to me? It's just a fantastic way of understanding why incidents happen in a very practical way, and I'm really happy to have worked on Tripod Lite and make that available, and and I'm grateful to the foundation as well for releasing that tool for free of charge to the world, because that gives everybody a chance to learn from that and improve the way that organizations are managed.
Okay, thanks everyone for your introductions. Let's move to some audience questions. We've only got a few at the moment, guys, so if you've got some, feel free to post them in, and Tony's been diligently answering a few in the background as well. So perhaps we can go to a question from Chris. So Chris asks, how does an organization manage consistency in the analysis? For example, one person's lack of supervision could be another's lack of training.
Really good question, and Chris, so thank you for asking it. And I think that question of consistency is important across all methods of investigation anyway. So the Tripod Lite doesn't have a magic wand to give you consistency. What we have tried to do is to say, look, if you know the area where the underlying cause might be, put it in. I think you need to then look at your internal training of how you put people through, using the drop-down menus, and the way we do it is through the drop-down and all the advice that Stuart's provided within drop-down menus that explains each of those. So use those drop-downs, it'll give you some consistency, and it'll help towards it. Use the online training when it becomes available. I saw someone was asking for when, and we'll answer that in a minute. But equally, if you're doing 1,000 near misses, if you get it 70% right, then that amplification will give you at least the areas that are the biggest problem that you've got. You don't have to be right every time when you suddenly do 1,000 of them. If you actually do it for a single large incident, then everyone's saying, well, how do you know this is? And there's massive, discussions about what did cause it at that point. And then you're into the detailed layer, underlying causation. So yes, the drop-down menus will help. Yes, the training will help. But equally, don't worry if you're not 100% right. Anyone want to add to that? I see Rob's nodding a bit.
I'll just add a little bit to that, and that is that within Tripod Lite, the PDF version of the tool, there is only space for one job factor, one organisational factor for each barrier. That was a deliberate decision based on, well, two reasons. One is so we could actually fit everything on a single page. Okay, so that was a very practical reason, but more importantly, the reason is so that it forces, it makes it simpler and forces the investigator to sort of choose, okay, what is the most likely or the most relevant job factor or organizational factor. However, we absolutely recognize that behind any sort of behavior, there could be multiple reasons. It could be training, it could be supervision, it could be other things as well. And in the Excel version of Tripod Lite, it does actually allow you to record multiple job factors and multiple organizational factors if you want to. Again, that's also why I say that the Excel version is for more complex investigations, or at least more experienced investigators.
Okay. I see there's a couple of questions about when's the online training going to be available. Stuart, do you want to give us a point of where we're at with it and what are the steps needed to be made without committing a date?
Yeah, so it's sort of reliant on the Energy Institute's new online training platform going live. So the content for the course has largely been developed. We're developing the videos for it now. We just need to develop questionnaires and things like that for it. So I'm going to say it will be probably Q4 of this year when that can go live.
Yeah. But there is internal training with the drop downs, as Stuart was pointing out in the tool when you download the tool.
Okay, let's move to another question. We've got a question from Patrick. He says he was involved in the early days of tripod development in the early 90s, working for Shell Manufacturing, and great to see this new iteration of tripod. This will help better analysis of incidents and management of safety. So the question is, most of the working world is SMEs. Is it intended to socialize this at that level? It would create a new wave of safety consciousness.
So really, Patrick, that would be absolutely great. I'd love to know where's the best place to go and socialize with the SMEs. Where would you think we should actually do it? Where should we publish? What should we do to get to those SMEs? Because I agree with you, there's thousands and millions of people working in them with very, very little access to professional advice. I don't know how to target them. So if anyone out there does, or if anyone out there is working for an SME and can give us some advice about where we should go, I would love to have that advice.
I was just going to add as well, Tony, what we've been trying to do up to this point is obviously socialize and publicize on LinkedIn and webinars such as today. And speaking at conferences, I know you're speaking at a conference with Stuart in November, and you've done a few other ones. So we are trying to get the message out there, aren't we, in various different means? But any help would be appreciated.
Do we want to touch the one about language that's up there, Ibrahim?
Yeah, so Willem asks, will the program be available in different languages? Stuart, this is probably something we work on a bit more on the Energy Institute side of things.
Yeah, so we currently don't have a program of translation planned, but what we have said is that if someone wants to make a translation, we're very happy to give you the all the text within Tripod Lite in a nice format so that it can be translated, and then we're very happy to take that translation and format the tool in the background and make that available. So I suppose for the time, if you want to have Tripod in a certain language and you're willing to help with the translation, get in touch with us and we'll see how we can make that happen.
Ibrahim, I saw a question from Carla regarding content for the online training course. Probably worth mentioning the different levels of support that's available to people. So first of all, you can download Tripod Lite from the Tripod Foundation free of charge, and it's integral. The support and the learning and the advice is integral in that particular version of Tripod Lite. The online training course is going to be, it's a short online one, and I'm right, is it? We're not charging for that, are we? Yeah, I am right with that. That's a short one. Tripod Beta, which is the daddy tool, as opposed to Tripod Lite, where Tripod originally came from. There are training courses and certified providers of those training courses available who are experts in Tripod Beta and incident analysis. If you need some support in the whole implementation of, look, I'm going to try Tripod Lite, but I actually could do with some support in implementing how I roll it out in my organization, be it small or large, please feel free to contact any of those associated Tripod Beta trainers. They've all been involved in Tripod Lite. They know the whole learning from incidents back to front. They're excellent at that, and they can provide you commercial support, and any of those registered licensed trainers that we certify are excellent, and they're based in, we have one over in Canada, someone down in South Africa, Malaysia, and around the Netherlands, Denmark, UK. So relatively global. There's not a huge number of them, but there are a sufficient number of them for you to go, and they would be happy to give you some commercial support as opposed to the foundation's free of charge support.
Yes, thanks, Tony. Also worth mentioning that you can find a list of those trainers on the Tripod Foundation website. So they're all listed on there and broken down by region. We've just got another question. Can you modify Tripod Lite, i.e. to suit your own business? I think the short answer is yes, but I'll let someone else maybe.
Yeah, there's a few. So we've absolutely recognised that people will want to modify Tripod Lite. There are two sort of ways. If you go to the Tripod website, there is a go to the Tripod Lite page. There is some information about that and about the things you can and can't do to modify it. But in short, yes, you can. The main ways I think people will probably want to modify it is those drop down menus. So the drop down menus we've included are ones that us and some of our partners have created, but we absolutely recognise that almost every organisation has its own set of categories that it may want to use to to categorise those organisational factors, those job factors. Those can be changed in the tool. You need Adobe Forms to do it. It's fairly easy to do. It's very easy to do in the Excel version. The other way that we recognise that people may want to do is they may want to sort of brand the tool, make other changes to make it consistent with their internal needs. And for that, we say, yeah, great. Get in touch with us though, and talk to us. So there are some changes that can be made fine, and some where you'll need to talk to us first, and maybe get a license to make changes.
I think that's really important about that. It is version 1 we're out there with. I think there are things like someone asked about timeline. There isn't a timeline. Yes, something we're thinking maybe it's worth adding on. It's already been commented on. And the more people that use it, then the more feedback we're likely to get onto what really works for people out there using the tool live.
I just saw there was another question that you answered, Tony, about the software used to Tripod for Tripod. I mean, I think I tried to share the Tripod Lite tool whilst you were talking, Tony, and go through that, and hopefully that appeared on the screen. But yeah, so it's important to note that, as I said, Tripod Lite it's a PDF, it's an Excel tool. It's been designed to be used without any special software. So as long as you can open a PDF, as long as you can open an Excel file, that's what you need. And that's one of the big factors behind Tripod Lite, that we wanted to create something that didn't rely on special software.
Thanks for that, Stuart. I think most of the questions have now been answered. Do let us know, guys, if you've got any more. Otherwise, I think we're more or less done on the questions. So maybe just to close, Stuart, we can remind everyone that the webinar will be made available as a recording after the fact. Again, if you're an EI member, you can use this towards your CPD. I don't know if we want to move to some closing remarks from the board.
I'll kick off if you want to. So first of all, thank you all for attending. Your time is very valuable, and I hope that we've been value for your time, because your time is money and it's probably the most precious thing you've got. And really, if you've got any feedback, please feel free to contact us. We really want this to get out there and multiply, and it will only do that when real people like yourselves are really using it and making sure it works for you.
Yeah, I think you've said it, Tony. I don't really have anything to add other than just to say that the link for the tool, I think we'll send that out when we send out the recording of the video. But otherwise, go to tripodfoundation.com or just Google Tripod Lite, and you should find the tool easily.
We close it there, Stuart.
I guess so. Yeah. So thank you very much for everyone for attending.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you.
everyone.
I just want to, should we